Welcome back to the Ultraviolet Tide. This is our June episode of the Top 5 on the Tide. I am Erica Fegler, and I am the founder of Low Ultraviolet, and I am joined every single month by the fantastic Leah Adams, who I first connected with way back when, probably late 2020, early 2021. The years all flow together, but Leah was one of our earliest ambassadors, and now she joins me for this monthly segment as my co-host. So Leah, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Erica, for having me, and hello to our listeners. As Erica mentioned, I'm Leah Adams. I am a melanoma survivor, a caregiver to a melanoma fighter, and a sun safety advocate.
Yes, and that just honestly boils down everything you do, because I don't even know how you can do an introduction, Leah, in just like a short amount of time, because you do so much for this community and you keep yourself so busy with advocacy and work and your own family health and your own personal health. Such a blast to do this with you every month. And I think it's super fascinating that we bring some differing perspectives, but also at the same time, when you listen to this, both Leah and I have had family members diagnosed with melanoma, and Leah herself has been diagnosed with melanoma. So as we're talking through those stories, those are really the lens through which we're kind of thinking about these things and talking through these things.
Absolutely. No, definitely. I think that we both are connected by something really unfortunate, but I think both of us have turned our pain into purpose, and we, have just been both very strong advocates and, supporters in the skin cancer and melanoma and sun safety space. So happy to do it with you, and I love being on the top 5 on the Tide every month.
I love this segment. And of course, this month we have another 5 fantastic stories for you guys to talk through. So I am going to kick us off with a story from Allure, because when I read this headline, I got really irritated. So I knew I had to dive a little bit deeper, and we're going to dissect it. So this Allure article is titled, "Have We Been Overdoing It on Sunscreen?" And they lead in by saying it's not even Memorial Day yet. As a disclaimer, I did pull these posts a couple weeks ago, so I know we're way past Memorial Day now, but just bear with me. It's not even Memorial Day yet, and am exhausted by the sunscreen discourse. We've already had our annual bout of a celebrity declaring they've sworn off SPF, this time under the guidance of a self-proclaimed wellness guru who cites our ancestors' lack of known banana boat as evidence that we don't need this stuff. An additional quote said, "After more than a decade editing skincare content, I realized that the world of beauty journalism can be a bit pushy in its sunscreen evangelism. I recently received a draft of a to-be-published Allure story about sun protection that suggests we should be wearing and reapplying full-body sunscreen all day, every day, even in the middle of winter when you have no plans to leave the house." Now, Leah, I had to pull this story because when I first and foremost saw this title, I got really irritated because Allure has been so good with their sun protective knowledge. I feel like they've been one of the better publications, in fact, of making sure that everything is factually checked back by either the Skin Cancer Foundation, the Melanoma Research Alliance, the Melanoma Research Foundation. Like, they've been really good in the past. So when I read this, I got a little frustrated. So let's unpack it a little bit, because I do think there's a little bit of sensationalism in there. We have to remember that all of these stories are sometimes written for dramatic effect because they're there to get clicks. They're there to get page views. So I want to make sure that we are smart consumers of this kind of content. So let's unpack it. First and foremost, they mentioned the celebrity declaring they sworn off sunscreen. Now, we have talked a ton about this. This was Kristen Cavallari. This was way back in May's episode. We talked about this. So if you want to hear more about that, go back to May's episode. So let's jump to the second one. Myth 2, needing full body sunscreen in the winter when you're otherwise fully covered with layers of scarves, sweaters, jackets, and boots. Leah, I don't know what this beauty editor was talking about, but talk us through this a little bit.
I mean, I think that this whole article screams dramatic. I think that, bringing up the Kristen Cavallari news and saying that you have to have a full body of sunscreen even in the winter This is the thing. I think, you mentioned this, Erica. I think that nowadays, to get people's attention, especially in the generation we're living in, we all have very short attention spans. So I think, these media outlets are trying to create these article headlines or news stories that are super eye catching, clickbaity, and a lot of it is just not always true. And it's just to get the viewer to read their article, to read the news story. And I don't really like that tactic unless it is going to be to benefit the consumer and benefit the individual. And obviously, there's been a lot around sunscreen in the last month because we are approaching summer in the United States, right? And a lot of other parts of the world. We're going to be talking about sunscreen. We're going to be talking about sun safety. Newsflash, this is not new. And the reason why we are probably hearing more about it nowadays is because there are so many more sun safety brands out there. I mean, every single month, I feel like I'm seeing a new Instagram account sharing a new product that they have, whether it's sunscreen, protective clothing. And I think that that's amazing. Why are we thinking that's a bad thing? I think sun safety is not a cookie cutter, idea or concept. Not every product is going to work for everybody. So I think it's an amazing thing that we are talking more about sunscreen. We're talking about different products. We're talking about different ways to protect our skin. Why do we have to see it in a negative light? So that's kind of how I read this article. And like you, Erica, I was frustrated and a little annoyed. And I do think that it was coming from a very dramatic, really kind of viewpoint.
Yeah, I agree. And I love it when I get sassy Leah on the podcast because she's going to tell you like it is. But I completely agree, Leah. I mean, I even know when I was pulling these stories. So, a little background scoop for the audience listening. Leah and I, when we craft stories and we pull them every single month, we put them into a document. And I have Google alerts that are pulling in all these stories and all these stories. And Leah went through and she's like, girlfriend, there's a lot about sunscreen. I'm like, you're totally right. And that's just because we are entering that time of year where these companies, all of these publications, they operate as a company, right? Their job is to make money for the company, which is fantastic and amazing. And I'm not saying that puts them in a negative light by any means, but it does mean that we need to be active consumers of the content that we read and consume, because there is so much content out there right now. I also think we have to be a little hyper aware of there are certain times where, like, if you believe something super firmly, you're going to go out and find resources that confirm that belief. We naturally, a lot of the times we engage in confirmation bias. So I just want to make sure that, if you are reading about, these ancestors and how they didn't have sunscreen, but they were fine, we're going to talk about that one a little bit more because I'm sure if you go out there, you can confirm that, our ancestors would have passed before melanoma would have come on. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but just a reminder to be active consumers, to make sure that we are double checking anything that we read that might seem a little iffy. And I will say, before we go in, Leah and I have to do this as well. We are not dermatologists. We are not doctors. And what we try and do is dissect this information for ourselves to make sure that we're giving you the best content possible. So you should do it for yourself as well.
Totally. And one more note before we jump to the next article on our ancestors. If you listen to a last episode on the top 5 on the Tide, we talked about that sun protection has been a thing for centuries.
Yes, we did.
So there have been so many of our ancestors protecting the skin that they were in using very early forms of sunscreen, UPF clothing, and so much more. So everybody just needs to calm down, in short. and scene and
I
rest.
love it.
Yeah. So thanks for kicking us off, Erica, with that first article. Listeners, don't worry, we're not going to get sassy with all of these articles. So we'll try to be calm and collected on the next four. So the next article is from from Today source, news source, and the article was titled "Mom 33 Worried for Years. Her mole was cancer. Doctors dismissed it. Her 2-year-old saved her life." So obviously, naturally, I saw this article, Erica, and I'm like, I must read. Like, this sounds really interesting. So the article unpacks a story about a woman named Amanda Elon, a mom of two, had a dark mole on her wrist dismissed by doctors for 2 years. And as we know in the skin cancer and melanoma community, 2 years of dismissing a mole could be honestly a matter of life or death. Her 2-year-old daughter's comment prompted her to insist on its removal, leading to a melanoma diagnosis. And the comment in the article talked about how she thought chocolate was on her wrist. And so she went in and, after persistence of, I'm really unsure about this mole. I would like it to be taken off. They took it off, and the mole came back stage 2 melanoma. And Amanda underwent successful surgery without needing further treatment, which is awesome. And, in the article, what I was really excited about is in this Today article, Mark Hurlbert, Dr. Mark Hurlbert, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Melanoma Research Alliance, was quoted in this article. And he talks about how skin cancers are the most common cancers across the United States and across the world. And he was quoted by Today.com saying, in the U.S. alone, there's more than 2 million cases of skin cancer. And he talks about how regular skin checks are crucial for early detection and treatment of melanoma. And he also talked about, which we listeners may be familiar with this, look out for the ugly duckling on your skin. So that means, if one spot stands out as being particularly unusual looking, be aware of that. And for example, Amanda's situation, her cancerous mole that was removed was much darker than the other moles on her body. And the article goes along to talk about how melanomas are more common in fair-skinned people who have red or blonde hair or blue eyes or green eyes. But it also, occurs in everybody, not just those individuals. And Amanda, as an investor and entrepreneur, after this, kind of experience she had, she started investing in health and wellness companies that encourage people to be proactive about their health. And soon after her diagnosis, Amanda joined the board of the Melanoma Research Alliance, which I think is so beautiful and such a sweet kind of, I don't want to say end to her story, but maybe like the beginning of the end kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
And she hopes that her experience encourages others to advocate for themselves. And she was quoted, while I would never say I know as much about melanoma or dermatology as a doctor, I do know more about my body than anyone else. Be persistent and be confident in yourself and your own observations. So I loved this story, Erica, and I'm so glad that it ended on a positive. I'm so glad that it captured a lot of data and research that the CEO of the MRA, the Melanoma Research Alliance, was also able to comment on. So, Erica, did you see this news story? And if so, what were your thoughts?
I love this news story. First and foremost, I think it was such a good story about a mom and her daughter. We talk a lot of times about how loved ones are sometimes the ones who notice a melanoma or a suspicious mole before you do. In this case, it being a 2-year-old is really sweet and adorable. The fact that she thought it was chocolate kind of melted my heart. So sweet. And I also love that the Melanoma Research Alliance was quoted in this. We love the MRA. We even had Stephanie from the MRA on the podcast, the past episode, and they are just so awesome about spreading information and making sure that articles like this do have factual information to back it. I also think that the quote about no one knows your body like you do is super important. We talk about this all the time. Like, we say to be your own best advocate, but that also extends to if you feel like something is off, well, you're having that gut feeling for a reason. And we have heard so many stories from this community about how they felt weird about a mole and they went to the doctor and they said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." And they just kept going. And it ended up being some form of skin cancer, whether it be melanoma or one of the other forms. So you really just have to have your own best interests at heart. And in this case, she did. And I'm so thrilled to hear that now she's on the board of the Melanoma Research Alliance.
I know. I really liked how the article ended too because um the article shared a lot about Amanda's story, but at the end it said that Amanda's daughter, even at a young age, has already started undergoing skin checks at a dermatologist given her mother's history and diagnosis. And Amanda says she will be forever grateful that her 2-year-old daughter said something about her mole. And Amanda now advocates for proactive health measures and supports melanoma research through the Melanoma Research Alliance. And she credits her daughter's observation for saving her life. So, such a beautiful and heartwarming story.
I love it. Maybe that 2-year-old is going to be one of our next doctors. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. So our next story is from the New York Post, and it is FDNY teams up with experts to offer free skin cancer screenings for firefighters. So the FDNY teamed up with the American Academy of Dermatology and the Firefighters Cancer Support Network to offer free skin cancer screening. So it shared some stats in this article that I thought were super fascinating, that firefighters face a 21% higher risk of melanoma, as we all know is the deadliest form of skin cancer, compared to the general public. And that source is from the American Academy of Dermatologists. So, while unprotected exposure to the sun's harmful rays is the greatest preventable risk factor for skin cancer, firefighters are exposed to cancer causing substances in the line of duty. So, especially when fighting fires, which can be inhaled, ingested, or absorbed through the skin. So, I love to see that they're teaming up with the American Academy of Dermatology to not only give skin checks, but also talk about these items that may put them at risk for developing other forms of cancer as well. And since launching its first screening in September of 2023, the FDNY and its partners have already provided free screenings to over 400 firefighters, which is absolutely awesome. And they've also identified over 70 potential or suspected cases of cancer, underscoring the critical need for ongoing vigilance and care. And I mean, this is just so awesome to hear about stories like this. I know we've talked before about military members and skin cancer, and firefighters and workers who are outside in the line of duty. They're also at risk. So, Leah, the story really warms my heart that we're hearing about these cases of melanoma and cancer being found. What was your thought when you read this story?
I know we've talked on the podcast before, Erica, about certain careers and professions putting you at a higher risk of developing skin cancer and melanoma. And when I read this article, I immediately thought about, all of those professions. And another thing I thought about, other than this being super awesome, is a lot of firefighters are men or who identify as male. And I think that, knowing the rates of skin cancer and melanoma in men compared to women, you know, this is a huge opportunity for men to get checked, in cases and instances where they may not always get checked, right? Because we've talked about on the podcast how sometimes women or females tend to be the ones that are more on top of their doctor's appointments or, noticing more appearance-wise things, and men may not notice them or they may not think, oh, it's no big deal or what have you. And so I think that, through this campaign and through this initiative, they will be hopefully, really taking care of a lot more men that are firefighters. And I know there are also female firefighters as well, but I think majority, when we think about think about a firefighter, it's usually a man, dressed in their uniform and what have you. So I guess I was just really excited and hopeful of reaching a population that is in need, not just being a firefighter, but also being male and men in our community.
Yeah, I agree. And the article ended by saying that the event marked the launch of the AAD's Firefighter Skin Cancer Checks program, which is a nationwide campaign aiming to provide 10,000 firefighters with free skin cancer screenings by 2026.
That is an awesome goal, and I
It
hope
is.
that they achieve that. So, way to go, AAD. They're awesome, and I love what they do for so many, for so many. All right, our next article, another story. I seem to get the stories today about individuals having a interesting case of skin cancer or melanoma, but this next article was from the BBC, and it was titled, "I had no idea my bad toe was a rare cancer."
Mhm.
And so the article talks about a woman named Donna Boynton from Middlesbrough initially had an infected toenail that turned out to be acral melanoma, which, as we have talked about on the podcast before, is a very rare and serious form of skin cancer. So Donna was quoted in the article talking about how poison was forming underneath the nail, and I thought this isn't right, so I went into the A&E, the hospital, and despite having her nail removed and receiving antibiotics, the infection persisted until she was referred to a dermatologist. So again, we have heard stories like this before, originally thinking it was one thing and then actually, with the help of a specialist like a dermatologist, actually finding out that it was something completely different.
Mhm.
And so the dermatologist that Donna was referred to found cancer after taking out part of her nail. And Donna learned, unfortunately, about her diagnosis while she was at work, which we've heard so many stories and ways of how people found out. And it seems like we never really have a great way or an environment of finding out, like what is the good
Uh-huh.
way or the appropriate environment to find out. I don't think there really ever is one because it's
Mhm.
never news that we want to hear.
Yeah.
And so as she was quoted, the nurse came in and they just told me that they're sorry to tell me it's acral melanoma. It's quite deep, and they couldn't tell me how long it's been there for. There's a possibility it spread to the rest of my body. And unfortunately, Donna had to have her toe amputated, but the cancer had already spread to her lymph nodes. So she was quoted again in the article saying, anyone who gets told they have cancer, your first thought is, I'm going to die. And Donna just urges anyone with an infected toenail that doesn't heal right away to please get checked and mention potentially acral melanoma to their GP, their general physician. And the article talked about acral melanoma, even though it is rare, accounting for 1 to 3% of melanoma cases, it is even more common in people that have brown or black skin. And we have talked about this on a previous podcast episode. So the article ends talking about how it's important that any unusual changes to your skin or nails are checked out by a doctor. Spotting it early could make all the difference. So
Mhm.
Erica, I thought it was important to always kind of be inclusive in our stories and talk about, the common melanomas and skin cancers, but also the ones that aren't always talked about a lot. So what were your thoughts after reading this article?
Yeah, Leah, I don't know if your brain always goes to Bob Marley when you hear about cases like this, because my brain certainly does. And it was a very similar case where they thought Bob Marley's was a soccer injury that ended up being melanoma. So it's one of those things that you don't think it could be skin cancer because it's under your nails. And I know for women, we typically keep our nails painted very often. And I have to say, I made a huge no today. And when I had my skin check, I forgot to take the toenail polish off my toes. And she told me, she was like, it's okay. Life happens. Things are busy. But next time you take it off, you need to inspect your toes for me. And if anything looks weird, you need to come in for another appointment. And I was like, you're totally right. I totally forgot. I took it off my fingernails, didn't take it off my toenails. And that is, part of that education coming into play where people and doctors now are looking for these rarer forms of melanoma that no one was really talking about 20 years ago. We now are checking everyone for them as part of their routine skin checks. So hopefully, the more we talk about these rare forms, the more education comes to light and the more lives we can possibly save by people catching it earlier.
Totally. I completely agree.
All right, so our next story, and you're seeing a little bit of a theme. Like I said, when I was pulling stories, there were a lot of sunscreen focused stories. So this next one is from Prevention, and it says, "Is sunscreen bad for you? Doctors break it down." And kind of what I want to do here, Leah, is they basically debunked the worst sunscreen misinformation that's currently circulated on X and TikTok. So I'm going to read some of these claims, and then I'm going to tell you kind of what these board certified dermatologists said in response. But maybe before I do that, I kind of want to get your take on it. So I might say the claim, get your take on it, and then we'll just come in hot with the dermatologist's opinion on it. So we have 4 claims, and the first one is that sunscreen causes cancer. Leah, I am sure you've heard this one before. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's not true. Sunscreen does not cause cancer. And I actually last month in May for Melanoma Awareness Month, I had the honor and privilege of speaking with a couple dermatologists that are, you know, board certified, experienced, literally have a degree in this, and know and have said, all of them were all consistent with saying sunscreen does not cause cancer. So, I heard it from the professionals, and also, I mean, that's not true at all. And so that is my thought on that. And like I said, if you ever want to check out my page and hear some dermatologists also tell you that are very well-renowned dermatologists, go check out my page and listen to their answers on it too.
Yep. So our board certified dermatologist said the exact same thing. So Dr. Gary Goldberg said claims that sunscreen cause cancer are absolutely not true. He said these social media claims are completely false and aren't based on any scientific data. He continues to say that the data clearly shows that UV rays cause skin cancer, and they mutate and cause cancerous cells. All chemicals that are used in chemical sunscreens in the US, because I know we hear that one a lot too, chemical versus mineral. And we'll talk a little bit in the next claim about certain ingredients that are found in chemical sunscreens. But he said that all chemicals that are used in chemical sunscreens in the US are approved by the FDA. So they've been shown to be safe, and there is no cause and effect evidence in humans that they cause cancer. So he basically echoed the exact same thing you said, Leah, and that we've heard so many dermatologists say before, that sunscreen is not the cause of cancer. It is sitting out and roasting in the sun and getting sunburnt that we have a stronger correlation between. So
Mm-hmm.
the second claim is that oxybenzone is unsafe. Now, Leah, I know you've heard this one before.
I have heard this one, and I think you're going to share with us some of the real data behind that ingredient and, what may have been seen with that ingredient, but then also bring it back to perspective of why it's in sunscreen. Because as we know, there are ingredients in products that are supposed to protect us for a reason. And so please share, Erica, what was actually shared, like real data and research.
So I thought this one was very interesting. So it starts off by saying that oxybenzone is another ingredient that has been flagged over concerns that it is a hormone disruptor. But there is no conclusive studies that oxybenzone is harmful to humans, and the research that links oxybenzone to harm cite rat studies where the rodents were actually fed oxybenzone. And they found that it would take someone 277 years of sunscreen use to have the same dose that produces these effects. And this is according to a study published in the Journal of American Academy of Dermatology. So This is a classic example of a little bit of confirmation bias that you want to believe a certain thing. So you go looking for studies and you cite studies like this that I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, like I hope I live a long and happy life, but I really hope I don't live 277 years.
Be like Moses from the Bible,
Yeah.
like just kicking at 300 years
Yeah.
old.
So I don't intend on living to be 277.
No, 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 no. Ugh.
All right, so this next claim we talked about at the top of the episode. And this one, the sassiness might come out a little bit on. So, the third claim is that our caveman ancestors didn't wear sunscreen and didn't get skin cancer. Leah, hit us with it.
I mean, our ancestors were out here protecting their skin where there weren't even products on shelves. Like, go back and listen, listeners, go back and listen to a previous episode. We talked about this from a credible news source. I think it was 4 ways that our ancestors have been protecting their skin for hundreds of years, like using clay as far as like, using it for sunscreen, using parasols made out of like silk and different types of cloth to protect their skin and their heads and their faces from the sun. I mean, also, if you think about it, our ancestors didn't have the technology and the resources and the data and ways of getting data and communication like we do nowadays. And back then, people had bigger problems to figure out, right? There were a lot of other really awful diseases that were taking out, populations of people, wars, all this type of stuff. That skin cancer and melanoma wasn't talked about because we didn't know about it. How can we be talking about something that we didn't really know about back then, right? Like, but over time and over years, there have been more people talking about it and realizing, oh my goodness, like the sun is not, something that we should be spending a lot of time in because it does X, Y, and Z. And over time, it takes people to understand this stuff. So, okay, I'm going to try to maintain my sass. So that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The article says that there has been so much commentary around skipping sunscreen that points out that our caveman ancestors didn't wear sunscreen and didn't get skin cancer. And I kind of put in parentheses that we know of. Because, like you said, Leah, we did talk about a story where there were so many ways that our ancestors were keeping themselves sun safe, from umbrellas to, certain like ointments and items. And I'm not recalling all of the stuff from the article, but I know that there were 5 ways that they were able to pull information from. So the article says it's not that our ancestors figured out how to avoid skin cancer. They typically died before the cumulative effects of sun damage would show up as skin cancer. We all know, hopefully, we know that skin cancer usually arises from cumulative sun damage. So, as time goes on, your risk of skin cancer increases. So, by your 50s or 60s, a lot of people who would have gotten skin cancer would see it by that point, and our ancestors were not living that long. So, I think that's another reason why we typically think in a lot of cases that skin cancer is an older person's thing. It's not that it's an older person's thing, it's just that by your 50s and 60s, more of the population that you're surrounding yourself with who are the same age are going to start experiencing skin cancer from, um, you know, decisions that they made in their earlier life. So thought that one was super interesting, and I feel like I could rant about that one with Leah all day long, but we have to move on to our final claim. So claim 4 is that mineral sunscreen is safer than chemical sunscreen. And I really try and talk about this one very delicately because I understand that we all have different preferences when it comes to sunscreen, sun safety, and that's amazing. But I always say we shouldn't yuck someone's yum. And if they're choosing to stay sun safe and like using a product that is certified by the FDA to be safe, like I have no space whatsoever to tell them what they can and can't wear. But Leah, I'm curious your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, this has been an ongoing debate and controversy. And again, like you, Erica, I'm number one, I'm not a dermatologist. I'm also not a scientist, and I'm not a researcher. So therefore, everything that I share with you is my own personal experience and my own personal feelings and thoughts. And my thing is this, and this is what I will say. The best sunscreen for you is the one that you remember to put on every single day, whether that's mineral, whether that's chemical. And I will also say that there are some safer brands of sunscreen out there than others, whether that's chemical or mineral.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing about chemical, there's a reason why, kind of my point before, why certain ingredients are in chemical sunscreens. There has to be something in there to protect your skin from the sun. And if it's not, for example, mostly mineral sunscreens have zinc oxide or titanium oxide. That is like the, big timers in mineral sunscreen, okay? Well, if that's not in chemical sunscreen, there has to be other chemicals or ingredients that are going to be in it to protect you from the sun, just like zinc and the titanium oxide does in the mineral sunscreen. So I love both mineral and chemical sunscreens. I have my brands that I like in both. But at the end of the day, it's personal preference, and knowing that, I'll let you say the real information data, Erica, but just knowing that there's information out there that are saying that all of the sunscreens that are on the market are not going to give you cancer or what have you, just know that there are safe options in both mineral and chemical sunscreens.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'll bring back the rest of the data from the article here in a second as well. But it isn't the mineral versus chemical. I feel like that is causing issues. And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect about that. There are certain products that have shown to have reactions, whether you have like eczema or maybe you've gone through chemotherapy and your body just isn't equipped to handle some ingredients like it was before. That is totally fine, but that doesn't mean that it's like making one form of sunscreen, like chemical versus mineral, unsafe. So that's not the debate we should be having. I also think that I'm not going to call out any brands, but I know that there is a sunscreen brand that I got a targeted ad for that's saying like, oh, well, our sunscreen's superior because we're not chemical. And I feel really concerned about that because I don't want us to, as a community, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the community gets the same targeted ads I do. I don't want us to see those things and think that like, oh, well, that must be superior and that must be better. And oh my gosh, the sunscreen I'm wearing must not be good. I want to make sure that like, just like I do with myself, that I'm thinking through these things. And I want to make sure that brands aren't taking advantage of that language and that we're educated and can kind of like point it out. But going off that, so the article continues that says all of the sunscreens sold in the US, whether they're mineral or chemical based, have been tested to be safe in humans. And ultimately, the type of sunscreen that you use is your personal preference. Like you said, Leah, the best sunscreen is the one that you remember to wear every single day.
Absolutely. No, for sure. And there you have it. Those are our top 5 stories of June. And we tried to keep our sass to a minimum. So hopefully nobody was offended or got really excited while listening. But as you can see, both Erica and I are super passionate in what we bring to you. And we're hoping too that, you share these stories with your friends and family and, maybe get a conversation going with them and see what their thoughts are. I think sharing these stories open up an opportunity to spread more education and awareness and really start to hear, what people's thoughts are and how you can either debunk the myths and really share the reality and the truth behind melanoma, skin cancer, and sun safety. So with all that being said, we're going to end today's episode with some community wins, which we love ending our episodes on. If you're new to the podcast and you're wondering what the heck are community wins, well, this is something Erica and I started a couple of months ago where, we realized, we don't always get the best news in, the cancer community, right? Depending on, where people are at in their cancer journey with skin cancer and melanoma. And, we think that it's really important to always share the wins that happen in the cancer community, whether that are they're small wins or large wins. And we take any win as a big win, even if an individual may think it's a small win. So we share people that have had clean skin checks, clean scans, people that have encouraged their friends and family to wear sunscreen or protective clothing. Anything that, people want to share on the podcast, we want to share it. So that being said, we have 5 amazing community wins that we have collected from our listeners. And so the first win is from My Melanoma World, Katie, and she said that she had a clear skin check after a year of having multiple biopsies and surgeries. So, yay, Katie. We love a clean skin check. And the next win was by Derm Solutions Cares. And she said, wrote a proclamation for our state governor in North Carolina to sign in Melanoma Awareness Month in May. And the governor signed it, which
I
is
love
amazing. Such good news.
It is. I saw so many of these in May. You guys were doing the most this May. It was amazing to see.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love seeing everybody be in their advocacy era. That's been
Yeah.
such an awesome thing to see and experience. And speaking of advocacy, our next win is from Adventure Our Life, which most of us should know is Amy. And Amy joined forces with 7 incredible women called the Butterfly Warriors in May to raise more awareness. And they raised $1,204 for the Skin Cancer Foundation through their
Amazing.
efforts this past month, which was awesome. I think this was like one of their biggest years. So kudos to you, Amy, and your Butterfly Warriors. The next one is something very sweet. It's by Amanda Weaver, and she says, someone I went to school with messaged me saying because of me posting about skin cancer, she got her first skin check and she found out that she had a BCC, which those of you that are listening, that is basal cell carcinoma, which is a type of skin cancer. And luckily it was able to be removed with no problems at all, but now is going to be diligent about her skin checks as well. So yay, Amanda, for your advocacy and sharing your story. And then our last community win was by Make Derm Sure, which love that Instagram handle name. That's great. And I know this individual. Her name is also Leah. She and I recently connected on Instagram, and she said, I worked with my son's school and helped put sunscreen on over 70 kids for a field day. And man, I remember those field days in school. You are outside for a very long time. So the fact
Hmm.
that she positively impacted 70 children, that is awesome. So kudos to you, Leah.
These are awesome. I love reading these every single month, and I love it when I see both new faces pop up with stories, but also some of our amazing members of this community who write in time and time again with these amazing wins. It feels like we're like in the room with you guys celebrating, and hopefully it feels the same on your end as well. But that rounds us out for our episode for June. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Leah, thank you so much for joining me. It is a blast as always to talk through these stories and really dissect them. I look forward to it every single month. So, with that being said, we're signing off for June. But if you have stories you want us to talk about in July, or if you have a community win that you want to share for July, we want to hear it. And like Leah said, that community win can be something that you feel is so small, but we want to celebrate it with you because we think every small victory is a big victory in our books. So with that being said, Leah, thank you so much for joining me, and we're going to sign off.
Thanks, Erica. Bye, everybody. Thank you.